This podcast is sponsored by Great White Hot Sauce. It's a small batch, handmade hot sauce made specially for you. So if you like hot sauce, you'll love Great White Hot Sauce. It's the hot sauce that bites back. Find it at www.trygreatwhite.com. The 1990s. Well, 1990 to 1995 to be specific. Do you remember where you were? Do you remember what you were doing? Do you remember the music you were listening to? Well, on this episode, we're going to talk about the music from 1990 to 1995. Let's see if we can jog your memory through music. So sit back, relax. Never mind. Just come as you are.
The KOFB studio presents Milk Crates and Turntables, a music discussion podcast, hosted by Scott McLean with his co-host, Jack Calabrese. Now, let's talk music. Enjoy the show.
Welcome to the podcast. Technical difficulties. That's what happens when you go live streaming. Again, welcome to the podcast. This episode is about the 90s, from 1990 to 1995. We're going to split it up. We figured a decade is too much to cover in an hour. We can't give it enough respect. So without further ado, let me bring on my co-host, the only guy I knew that still had a mullet in 1995. Mr. Jack Calabrese.
I don't know if I still had a mullet. Did I still have a mullet in 1995?
You were mullet man.
Yeah, I might have still had a mullet. I was trying to think. It was a mullet.
Maybe it was a modified mullet.
It was acting like the rainforest. It was receding fast. I had Sting coming by, organizing benefit concerts
for your hairline
to save it.
How about having the horseshoe with the mullet? You know what I mean? The George Costanza, except the mullet. You see those?
I never went that far. I got to a point where I was just like, that's it. It's over.
Gone.
It's over.
All
Actually, It was a friend of mine that said, hey, look, you put up a good fight, but it's all over.
Time to bring it home.
And I was like, what? He was like, all I know is when I come in tomorrow, I don't want to see that. And he was like, by the way, that salad thing that you're doing in the back, it doesn't work.
All right.
Sobering moment.
Ready to do a good show?
Absolutely.
All right. Let's jump right into it. So 1990. We're not going to go year by year, but we should start off the decade with 1990, right? So let me just kind of throw out things that were there in 1990. Like, groups that formed and not necessarily hit. There it is, the Supernatural reference. I love that. Ambiance to the show. Groups that formed or kind of broke off and became their own thing in 1990s. There were groups like D-Light, right? Groove is in the Heart, big 90s, early 90s song. The Verve formed in 1990. And Peter Murphy leaves Bauhaus, goes on his own, and in 1990, he wins Best Alternative Song for this.
Cut you up.
One of my all-time favorite songs. This is such a great song and such a difference, a change from Bauhaus, right? So Yeah. Good stuff right there. So those are
Fantastic stuff. So, I mean, Peter Murphy, as an example. I mean, listen, when Peter Murphy left Bauhaus and did that record, which, by the way, if by chance you're listening to this and that's the only song that you know off that record, you're really missing something.
Oh,
Because there is some amazing stuff on that record.
Indigo Eyes.
Indigo Eyes is not on that record.
That's not on that record?
No, it's on the one before that. But it's that is an amazing, amazing record. Makes you wonder exactly what he probably wondered back then. Look, I'm Peter Murphy. Bauhaus, I don't need these guys. I write all the songs. I sing lead.
Well, Bauhaus went on to form, the rest of the band formed Love and Rockets.
Love and Rockets.
So they were like, well, we don't need him either, because they had their little success in the 80s.
Short-lived.
Yeah, they were around, but Peter Murphy was kind of referred to as Bowie Light.
Yeah.
Or
Bowie Dark.
Or Bowie Dark, yeah. The dark wave.
Yeah. My missus is a big Peter Murphy fan. We've met him a couple of times and seen him many times over the number of years. He's always a great performer.
Did you ever see the video of Bauhaus at, I think it was Debworth? They do Bela Lugosi.
Did you say Debworth?
Well, okay. Debworth. One of those British festivals. I said Nebworth.
Nebworth, right.
I said Nebworth. Yeah. See, you got cheap headphones on. That's why you don't really hear anything. Scott, the IT guy, was supposed to hook you up.
I'm sorry. I don't have headphones like you. I don't have a fucking time machine.
Hey, like I said, these are 1997 Pioneer Monitor 10s. These things pick up a pin drop. Nothing but the best for me.
Yes,
so he does that song.
And they look amazing on you.
He does that song, Bela Lugosi.
Bela Lugosi's dead.
Dead, right? The band's playing, and he comes from the side of the stage, except he's not walking. He's hanging upside down.
Yep.
With his arms crossed over his chest, and does almost an 8-minute version of the song hanging upside down. Like, is he a real vampire? Like, that's when blood would kind of rush to your head after 8 minutes.
That's what you do when you don't know how to dance.
I guess
you got to come up with some other stuff, man.
But if you ever get a chance to see that on YouTube, it is a great performance. And then when he's done with the song, they just float him off.
A little Spinal Tap-ish, yeah.
I don't know. I thought it was pretty good, man. I thought it was very different. Scott's headphones came over with Columbus. Yeah, thanks, Scott, the IT guy. And Jack's came in a box of popcorn. Okay. Anyways. Oh, how's this? It didn't make it.
Hey, what's the matter? Your gong didn't come in the mail today?
There you go.
Oh, my God. Hey, listen. Can I interrupt?
Yeah, you always do.
Before we get into the 90s, don't you think we should address Charlie?
Rest in peace, Charlie Watts.
Charlie Watts.
2 weeks ago, we were talking about Dusty Hill, and today we have to mourn the loss of a great drummer. Contrary to one of our friends' beliefs, Charlie Watts was a great drummer.
Who, by the way, did call me this afternoon.
Oh, I'm sure he was thrilled to.
He did call me, and I said, "You are not calling me to gloat, I hope." You son of a bitch.
Yeah. Charlie Watts had a great run. He had
80 years old, hadn't missed a gig since 1963. He actually did not want to join the Rolling Stones. But he decided that he was going to do it. But he was a jazz drummer, and he gave that band a lot of swing. He doesn't get nearly as much credit as he should.
Well, neither does Ringo, but that's what happens when you're behind geniuses. But they did an interview with him recently about going on this tour, and he said you have to be mentally and physically in shape to do this. He said you got to get in shape before the tour. You have to stay in shape during the tour, both mentally and physically, because every night you have to go out there and do the same thing and stay disciplined. Like drummers they don't have the luxury to kind of freestyle, you know?
Yeah.
They don't have that Keith Richards ability to just play sloppy. It just doesn't happen with drummers, right? So 2 weeks ago we lose the bass player from ZZ Top. Today we lose the drummer from the Rolling Stones.
Well, one of the things that
the rhythm section, didn't you say the rhythm section's taking a beating?
dude, they're taking a beat lately. You got to watch out, you know.
Yeah.
One of the things that Keith Richards said about Charlie Watts is that if you listen really closely, he always, you know, like most drummers led the band, right? They gave them direction. They had the beat. And they said that Charlie was always a little behind, which kind of gave them their sound. Now I don't have the technical ability to kind of pick that out, but that's what you know, people in the music business say, that he just had this kind of little bit of a lag, and he had that kind of jazz feel that counterbalanced the rest of the band. Just amazing.
He had good negative space.
Well, he was a good drummer.
Okay, let's stop with the dead air. All right, Charlie, rest in peace.
Wait a minute, was he a good drummer? Did you think he was a good drummer?
Yeah. You'd never get that argument from me.
All right, I'm just making sure.
I mean, anyone that could keep those animals in control on stage, you know, or keep up with them, you know, or adjust to them. He was a great drummer. He wasn't a finesse drummer. He wasn't a show stealer. He wasn't a drum solo guy.
See, I think exactly the opposite. He was a finesse drummer. He was not a power drummer. He wasn't a big crash guy.
Okay. I say finesse like Keith Moon, like the way he played.
Keith Moon was not a finesse drummer. He was a monster.
His style.
Yeah, but finesse is finesse.
All right. Okay, Finessa. Let's move on.
Vanessa Redgrave.
You really want to get technical? You really want to go down that rabbit hole? Get some new headphones.
I can hear you just fine.
Okay. Moving on. We're not off to a good start here. We're not. So where were you in the early 90s?
Beginning of my relationship with my now wife.
Okay.
So living in Winthrop, and then moved over to Somerville, the Somerville Medford line. But that was a big change, and it was a big change in music for a lot of reasons. You know, I think that music had changed dramatically, or was on the verge of changing dramatically.
Oh, it certainly did change. I mean, yeah. I always use the phrase Nirvana killed Loverboy, you know.
And thank God they did.
Alice in Chains killed Cinderella. You know, you could go
down
the line, right? You know.
Well,
Soundgarden killed Poison.
Yeah.
You know,
Alice in Chains killed Warrant.
Cinderella. I already said that. Find your own reference.
I'm sorry. Jeez.
Okay. No, but
Screaming Trees killed.
Okay.
Extreme.
Grunge took over in the early 90s, but it also, while before it did that, there's always that change. There's always that change in the decades, right? Some things bleed over. There were certain bands that bled over, but not all. Not all made it through the void.
No, but I think you bring up a good point. You know, the decades don't start and end from a musical standpoint. The stylings start to change sometimes prior to the decade starting. So I think there are precursors to grunge, and some of that actually, believe it or not, actually came out of LA that were rebelling to a certain extent against the hair metal bands. So when I think of bands like 9 Inch Nails,
right?
When I think of Jane's Addiction,
right?
Even Guns N' Roses to an extent.
No, Guns N' Roses was not a hair band. I never considered them a hair band. They had long hair, but so did a lot of bands in the '60s.
Yeah,
And they
I
weren't
think they got.
teased up like, you know, like
I
Motley
think
Crue.
I think they got lumped in with hair metal
They did.
initially,
Yeah.
and unfairly so. This is a band that came out of the dregs and that had a lot of grit to them. Where a lot of the bands, the hair bands of the late '80s and early '90s, including bands like Loverboy, really had more of a corporate feel. So it's kind of an interesting. You talk about history repeating itself. If you get into the mid '70s, you have a lot of corporate rock, Foreigner, Boston, 38 Special, Kansas, bands like that. And there's nothing wrong with those bands. They have some great songs and whatnot, but just a different feel, not as organic as some of the other things. And what was the rebellion against that corporate rock and
Was
that
punk.
prog rock that happened was punk.
So
So you had
move up to
you
the
had,
'90s, grunge is the new punk, right?
yeah, exactly. So you had again that whole corporate entity, Warrant, big band, Loverboy, big band at the time, Cinderella, all of those hair metal bands. And I hate to say this, but to a certain extent, I blame Van Halen because they were the model. Light party band, not only could really play, but could do ballads and could do poppy stuff. And I think that it got watered down by the record companies saying we need to create our own version of Van Halen. And I think that's where a lot of the hair metal came from.
It's possible. I think the LA scene, they
Possible,
went
but
they kind of
but possible. It's right.
okay. The LA scene was they were over the top eccentric. Uh, that whole Sunset Strip. Every band was trying to have bigger hair. It was almost like they were leapfrogging each other to try to
Yeah,
see, and then they kind of saturated the scene. And I mean, like then you look at groups like Cinderella. They were from like Philadelphia, you know, but you would have just if you see them and you didn't know where they were from, you'd think they were from that whole scene, right on Sunset Strip. Maybe
but
they did
they
go out there, but they're from Philadelphia. I know that.
yeah, but I mean, even a band like Poison, I think we're from like Ohio or Cincinnati or something like that,
Went to
and went
L.A.
and went to L.A. and did that the whole thing. So it was the Whiskey a Go Go and the Sunset Strip,
Right.
following the likes of Motley Crue and Van Halen and following in those footsteps. But the corporations, the record companies watered it down because they wanted to make it accessible to MTV and to girls.
Yeah, yeah. So they kind of self-destructed. They became oversaturated. Enter grunge, and the thing about grunge is the people that were listening, like say the people in the Seattle scene that were listening to these bands and had them all to themselves, kind of like the counterculture of music. You know, they were not pretentious. They were not over the top. They just almost like a version of garage band rock, right? Garage rock. And what happens is it starts to one fucking video exploded. Like that was the fuse that lit the atom bomb. Not that an atom bomb has a fuse, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
It lit the stick of dynamite. And when they played, I think it was was it no Ricky Rackman didn't play it. It was on 120 Minutes. Who hosted 120 Minutes on MTV? Do you remember?
I
I
don't.
know we know who it is. I can't, but he plays "Smells Like Teen Spirit," and that thing went nuclear. No one had ever heard anything like that. Nobody had seen a video like that. It was raw. It was unhinged. It was total rebellion, and that was it. The floodgates opened. So you start getting these people that were hair metal people and rock and roll people, like straight rock and roll, that started kind of leaning over into that scene. And just like anything, it lasted 5 years, and that was that for grunge. Went 5 years or so. I think either due to drug addiction or just they got sick of it, bands got sick of it, or they just didn't want to go mainstream, or whatever it was. The only two bands that survived that, really, that made the change were Pearl Jam and Soundgarden. Pearl Jam
Yeah.
just stopped doing videos. They're like, we're not going to do this. We're not going to play this game. Then they went to war with Ticketmaster.
And lost.
Soundgarden kind of lowered their tone in a sense. They kind of changed up their music, started instead of like Outshine, they were doing Black Hole Sun, things like that, which they were. Listen, I still say today Chris Cornell was the greatest singer of a generation. And I've said this a number of times on this show.
Great singer, great range, could sing low, could sing crazy high.
5 octaves.
And I'll tell you the other thing about Chris Cornell that people may not, realize, and it's probably one of the things that maybe differentiates the LA scene to, the grunge scene, is that in the LA scene, very, very competitive, did whatever they could to kind of cut each other down, outdo each other and whatnot. And the grunge scene was very, very communal to an extent, to an extent. But there are a number of bands, whether it's Alice in Chains, certainly Pearl Jam, that really credit Chris Cornell as being a centerpiece and one that was inspiring people, motivating them, and helping people along. Soundgarden, believe it or not, was the first band, one of the first bands up in the grunge scene to actually get a major record deal.
I believe that. I didn't know that, but I believe that. Yeah, that was a talented band. That was a talented band, man.
The funny thing is, when you talk about Pearl Jam, you had the principal members, so Stone Gossard, Jeff Ament, Mike McCready, in a rotation of drummers, Spinal Tapish. How many drummers has Pearl Jam had, Scott?
Spinal Tapish.
Five, six.
Yeah.
Somewhere that it's been a rotating thing. But Eddie Vedder, lead singer, and most people associate Pearl Jam or Eddie Vedder with Pearl Jam and vice versa. He was a California boy. He was down in San Diego and played with a band called Bad Radio. And when Andy King, who was in Mother Love Bone, OD'd and died, and the guys from Pearl Jam, who were not called Pearl Jam at the time, were trying to reform and figure out what they were going to do next. They were actually looking for singers. And interestingly enough, the person that actually kind of referred Eddie Vedder to Pearl Jam was Jack Irons, who was the drummer from the Red Hot Chili Peppers.
That's kind of like how Morrissey met Johnny fucking Marr. They were introduced by what's his name? Billy Duffy, the guitarist from the Cult.
The Cult, yeah, sure.
Yeah, I mean Morrissey played with the band he was in and wasn't really happening, and he said, "Hey, I know this guitar player. You guys might hit it off." So then you see the Cult, you see the Smiths, and you're like, but they were all over there in that scene, again, helping each other out.
Yeah.
When
I talk about them, the bands helping each other out, and Chris Cornell kind of leading that charge. Who didn't help out in that regard, and who had kind of a undercurrent of animosity and competitiveness?
Nirvana.
Pearl Jam. Kurt Cobain used to say that he hated that band.
Yeah.
And he said that he hated that band because they were more Zeppelinish than they were more punkish or whatnot. But I think it was Courtney Love that basically kind of spilled the beans and said, those two guys were at the top of the heap. It was a competitive thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Kurt didn't dislike Pearl Jam. Kurt didn't like the fact that Pearl Jam at some point was maybe outshining Nirvana.
I think so. I think they were their own entity. They weren't. Pearl Jam separated themselves, right? they
They
separated
they
themselves from that group when they came out with their first album. I mean, a
10 sold what,
masterpiece,
10 million copies or whatnot.
masterpiece.
And
Yeah,
so true to staying away from kind of the hair metal thing that one of their drummers, it may have been their second or third drummer, Dave Abruzzi, gave like interviews in Drummer Magazine and whatnot, and was going way too far in terms of trying to get the limelight, that they fired him.
yeah, yeah. Didn't he do the interview with Drummer Magazine or something?
That's right. That's
And they
exactly
were
right.
like, you know what? You're an asshole.
Yeah. So much
You're an
so that even
asshole.
even when those guys were inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, even though he played the drums on Versus and Vitology, he was not part of that crew.
No, no.
It's just a little rough.
So back at the beginning of the 90s, something else also happened. You had a whole nother counterculture that was about to explode, and it was hip hop.
Mm-hmm.
So you had NWA, they break up. Eazy-E and Ice Cube get into this big, rap battle. And Ice Cube, probably the smartest one in the band, goes off on his own.
I don't know. Dr. Dre,
Dr. Dre
he's
was a good
made,
producer.
he's made a lot of money.
He was a producer. I mean, producers always make money. He wasn't the star of that band, though. He wasn't the star of that group. Ice Cube was the star of that group. Eazy-E and Ice Cube.
Wait. What are you talking about? Dr. Dre was
what when he was with NWA?
He sang on those songs. He rapped on those songs.
He wasn't the dominant one in the group, though. He definitely wasn't the dominant one in the group. I can tell you this because I was listening to this stuff.
Oh, and I
was deep into it. I don't know if you were.
How dare you?
You've never discussed NWA with me, buddy.
I love NWA.
So Ice Cube goes out on his own and does the greatest diss song in history called No Vaseline. And everything goes to hell in a handbasket. And then it all starts to break open. But on the other side of the coast, you had, those East Coast rappers starting to pick up their
Biggie Smalls.
Well, yeah, he came along a little later, but so that was the creation of kind of gangster rap. NWA, then Ice Cube goes on, does Gorillas in the Mist, and a couple of other good albums. And so you got that happening. And then you have, again, Christian rock. You have like, what's her name? Amy Grant. So it was. There it is again. Hold on. I like that.
Isn't it? It's awesome.
Yeah. So
by the way,
with grunge.
Wait a minute. By the way, it's not awesome at 3:45 in the morning.
Oh, better you than me. Along with grunge, you had the birth of pretty much the golden age of hip hop. Starts to come around, and so those two genres that were subcultured originally become mainstream almost at the same time, which is kind of interesting, the total opposite sides of the spectrum.
But you got. Go ahead, keep going.
No, that was the birth of the golden age of hip hop. I mean, it dominated the decade pretty much.
I wholeheartedly agree. Out of the kind of malaise of the mid to late 1980s, right? Michael Jackson kind of peaked and arced, and I think he put out Dangerous at the beginning of the 1990s, which was certainly not up to Bad, or certainly not Thriller. I mean, still a good record, but kind of crested and kind of on the downward slope. Prince was exploring different things with the new power generation and was putting out different music, and quite honestly could give a shit about the charts.
Prince put out in 1990 Graffiti Bridge, 1991 Diamonds and Pearls, 1992 The Love Symbol album, 1994 in 1994 The Black Album. He was busy in the early 90s.
He was busy in the early
He was
90s,
busy.
but what I'm saying is he wasn't necessarily chasing radio hits at
No,
that
he
time.
never did.
He was no, that's not
Maybe
true.
with 1999, he was looking to get launched.
You don't think Purple Rain was radio accessible and intentionally so?
Purple Rain, but I'm saying 1999 launched him into that, and then it followed with Purple Rain. Yeah, I mean, it was a movie soundtrack.
Through
Purple
the
Rain was
late
a
80s,
movie
but
soundtrack.
to Prince's credit, he evolved, he recognized and didn't want to be this jukebox. He wanted to play his music and explore the things that he loved, which the credit to him. You know,
Who was the only member that stuck with him through all the group changes? From 1999 through the
Dr. Funk.
Dr. Funk was the only one that he kept with him the whole
Dr.
time.
Funk. But here's one of the reasons why I have
That's
more of
the
an
keyboard player for people that are listening.
Thank you. Here's one of the reasons why I have more appreciation for Prince in those times than I did for Michael Jackson, because Michael Jackson had that once in a lifetime album with Thriller, and maybe twice, because the Bad album is a fantastic record.
No, before that was Off the Wall.
Off the Wall, another great
Off
record.
the Wall came, and then he beat his own records with the next.
But he was chasing after album sales. He literally wanted to sell 100 million albums. Where Prince, and I just have a little. This is just me. I have a little bit more respect because he was trying to chase his musical vision, regardless of what the pop charts had to say.
He wasn't intimidated by anybody. He went down his own path. So let's stay on hip hop in the early 90s. In 1992, one of the greatest debut albums of all time is released, and it's a hip hop album. The Chronic by Dr. Dre. That album absolutely, again, blew up, went nuclear, like, Nirvana's Nevermind. The Chronic is still, to this day, a classic hip-hop album.
Absolutely.
Which introduced the world, okay. Dr. Dre did the soundtrack for a movie starring Lawrence Fishburne called Deep Cover. And the soundtrack song was called Deep Cover, and it was the introduction of Snoop Dogg into the hip-hop world. Because it's 187 on an undercover cop, right? That's my Snoop Dogg imitation. No one had ever heard his style. And he was introduced to Dre by Dre's brother, who was Warren G.
Yeah.
Right? Warren G was one of the originators of the G-Funk sound of that time. So Snoop goes on the Chronic album, drops some tracks, and from then on, now he gets launched into the stratosphere.
Of course.
Hip-hop, and that was the beginning of hip-hop making its move on the mainstream. Rock and roll. Hey, listen, grunge faded in 5 years. Hip-hop is still here. Thanks to the originators, the OGs of the 80s. Eric B. and Rakim, Ice Cube, Big Daddy Kane, all those guys. But they carried it. NWA broke the glass ceiling, and hip hop's still around and grunge is dead.
Do you remember Snoop's real name?
It is Snoop's name it's some like Marvis or what is it? I can't remember.
Blank and Hobbs.
What's that?
Blank and Hobbs.
I don't know.
Calvin Brodus.
That's what it is. Yeah, and it is.
What about Dr. Dre?
But Dre's real name?
Yeah.
Andre.
Very good.
Yeah, Andre.
Not old, but
new. I don't know.
Andre Young.
Yeah. See, you use the word old.
Wait. Ice Cube?
Calvin Brodus.
O'Shea Jackson.
Yeah, that's right. It doesn't matter.
No, it doesn't. I'm just bringing up fun.
What's Ice-T's real name? What's Big Daddy Kane's real name? What's Eric B's name? What's Rakim's real name? That shit doesn't matter.
No, but it's just fun. I'm just having a little fun.
Well, there's no fun in hip hop, buddy. You got to be serious with the old school stuff.
That is not true.
You got
Plenty of fun in
you
hip
got to
hop.
bring it down to the street level, man. We're not here to have fun. We're talking about the OGs. Yeah, and you and your acoustic guitar. So, actually, 1992 is, and that's when the big East Coast West Coast thing broke, as far as Bad Boy Records with Puff Daddy,
Which was the stupidest thing ever.
And Death Row Records.
Dumb.
Yeah, it led to the death of two of the greatest rappers of all time.
Yeah,
whether people like them or not.
You come up from humble beginnings, and you attain a certain level of success, and initially people appreciate it, but then they come to resent it.
Yeah. I mean, it was all posturing. It was all posturing.
It's just like this show. Humble beginnings. People are on board right now, but when we have corporate sponsors like Pepsi and we're featured during the Super Bowl halftime show, people are going to get really angry.
We could actually do a Super Bowl halftime show. We really could. I bet you people would tune in to watch us rather than the crap they show on the stage there now.
Oh, it has gotten worse, hasn't it?
Oh,
it's terrible.
Horrible. It's horrible.
But speaking of which, just out of curiosity, has the Super Bowl halftime show really paid homage to hip hop?
No.
That's a real opportunity for them, don't you think?
They won't do it. It's not mainstream enough. But Snoop Dogg goes on and Dre produces his album Doggy Style, which is the first debut album to go to #1 on the charts. Yeah. His first album goes to number one.
Wait a minute. First album of all time or first rap album of all time?
I would probably say, I would think
you're on dangerous ground here.
Well, I know it went to #1, and maybe it's a rap album, maybe it's a hip hop album to go to #1. Because there was no hip hop albums that came into the. Huh?
Do you know whose debut album went to #1?
Who?
The Go-Go's.
Oh, Jesus. All right. So let's get into some albums that came out in the 90s. So in 1990, you had, and this is just a brief list. You had Depeche Mode, Violator, shot them into the 90s,
Great
launched
band.
them into the stratosphere again. There was this group, Concrete Blonde.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know why they didn't make it. They were a phenomenal band. Jonette Napolitano, lead singer, bass player. Their album Bloodletting came out in 1990. If you want to hear a great album, listen to that album. I don't know if you've ever listened to it, but Bloodletting is a great album.
Deborah and I got to see Concrete Blonde a couple of times. Great band.
So
underrated.
This is the hit that everybody knows.
Joey.
Right? This whole album is good. This is maybe the lightest song on the album. Her voice is unbelievably strong, And they were a good band. They had their own unique sound. So if you want to hear a good album from the 90s, Concrete Blonde, Bloodletting, So you also had Public Enemy, Fear of a Black Planet, huge album for them, and Sinead O'Connor, I Do Not Want What I Haven't Got.
How did you pronounce her name?
Sinead.
Sinead?
Sinead O'Connor, yeah.
It's not Sinead.
It depends on if you're Irish or Italian.
Okay.
It's Sinead.
Are you serious?
Okay.
Sinead.
Then in 1991, you have U2, Achtung Baby, right? GNR, Guns N' Roses, Use Your Illusion 1 and 2, probably their best, the last great albums that they put out, and they weren't even that great, but
Well, can we talk about that for a second?
yeah,
You know
Guns
what?
N'
You know
Roses.
where? You know where they fucked up on that? Use Your Illusion 1 and 2. How about just use your illusion?
Exactly.
Take the best songs from both of those records and have one great album.
That's what that was the knock on that.
Yeah.
Why do you have to sell 2 albums? Oh, because they have
Too much. Not to mention, to a certain extent, they abandoned, their kind of signature sound. They got polished. They got really into the studio and whatnot. Like November Rain. It's too much. It's too much.
He wanted that. He was that. He wanted to explore his musical. Like Prince. So then you had Nirvana, Nevermind. That was a monster. In the hip hop world, you had a classic, Tribe Called Quest, The Low End Theory. Ozzy Osbourne, No More Tears. Tom Petty, Into the Great Wide Open. And Van Halen for Unlawful Carnal Knowledge. Right? That was 92. That was actually 91. 92, we had REM, Automatic for the People. Dr. Dre, The Chronic.
Go back.
Okay.
Automatic for the People was a great, album in 92, but Out of Time came out in 91.
Well, that album was released in 92.
Out of Time was 1991.
Right.
Automatic for the People was the next year.
That's what I said. I said moving on to 92.
Yeah, but you forgot 1991, Out of Time.
It wasn't on my list.
Well, I was just adding it. I'm just trying to help you, man.
How did I forget it if it wasn't on my list?
I don't know. I'm sorry. I'll just sit here.
So you had The Chronic, and you had Morrissey releases Your Arsenal, one of his best solo albums. Of course, I had to throw that in there. 93, Wu-Tang, the Wu-Tang Clan, Enter the Wu-Tang, 36 Chambers. That was an epic hip-hop album. Aerosmith, Get a Grip. So you got that mix. This is one of my favorite albums of that year, actually. The Rolling Stones, Voodoo Lounge. So amongst all this that's going on, these 2 bands are still pumping out great albums. And then you throw in Sting, 10 Summoner's Tales, right?
Mm-hmm.
Nirvana, In Utero. Smashing Pumpkins, Siamese Dream. And U2, Zooropa. So they put one out, 90 and then 92, right?
Yeah.
So they were busy. Then 94. Now, 94 was interesting because this was the beginning of Britpop. This is when people started getting sick of the grunge scene started getting oversaturated. And Britpop started moving in with Blur, although they were formed in 88, but they started hitting it. They didn't really make it to the States, but Oasis comes out with Definitely Maybe. And that opened the floodgates for the Britpop to come to America. Weezer. What do you think of Weezer?
Hit or miss. I love there are songs of theirs that I absolutely love, and there are songs of theirs that I just don't get.
That's a good way to put it. They're brilliant in what they do.
Yeah.
They've changed up, and they're still pumping out albums. Actually, they were at Fenway recently backing up
Green Day.
Yeah.
So the way that I talk about Weezer is there are just some of their stuff that I'm just not hip enough to get my arms around.
Meaning, like what, the Sweater Song?
I don't get it. There are some bands that are regarded as really hip. So, some of the Weezer songs I just don't get. Even bands like Arcade Fire. I like some of their stuff, but people go crazy over that band, and I don't get it. I just don't get it.
Yeah. And you had Soundgarden, Super Unknown in 94, Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds, Let Love In. And again, I think I said the Stones, Voodoo Lounge. 95, you go Oasis, What's the Story, Morning Glory.
Fantastic
so those
record.
2 monsters in a row. Both of those albums. That, to me, is the equivalent of U2 Atom Bomb, How to Dismantle an Atom Bomb, and everything you need you can't take with you, whatever the
All that you can't leave
all that you
behind.
can't leave behind. Yeah, those two albums back to back were were the greatest two albums they put out back to back since the '80s. I think.
Yeah. Yeah.
Those two albums were fantastic.
Yeah, they were great.
Those albums are like a mix and match, just like Definitely Maybe and What's the Story, Morning Glory. Those are a mix and match.
It's unusual for a band that has the longevity that U2 does, that has that creative crest, the Unforgettable Fire, and then the Joshua Tree, and even to a certain extent, Octung Baby, and then they kind of get lost a little bit, right? And then they have that resurgence. That does not happen that often in music.
No. And then you get PJ Harvey. She starts to break out. Bjork starts to break out. Garbage with, the Butch Vig and the gang, Shirley Manson. Alanis Morissette, Jagged Little Pill. You see where this is going? This is what leads up to the second half of the 90s.
Yeah.
Right. And
and also, right, you got to give credit to where credit is due. Butch Vig of Garbage. What's his real claim to fame?
Nevermind.
He produced Nevermind.
Yeah.
He's probably made more money off that project than he ever did with Garbage.
Probably why he said, I'm just going to start my own band because I can. Yeah. I don't have to worry about it. But Garbage was very successful.
Great stuff. Great band. Shirley Manson.
They just came to West Palm Beach, Alanis Morissette and Garbage.
Oh, that would have been a good show. Did you not go to that?
No, I didn't go to it. The ticket prices were, I'm funny with that. Like, it's not worth, I like them, but I don't love them that much. And I'm going to pay, because I don't want to sit up in the fucking lawn. You know what I mean?
No, you want to pay to have good seats.
Yeah, and I wasn't going to pay $180 to see those two.
No,
like the Pretenders. I wouldn't spend $180 to go see the Pretenders today.
No, not after we saw them for $14.
Exactly. So
have you? And I apologize for this, but have we talked about 9 Inch Nails at all?
No, we haven't.
Are you a fan?
Yeah, one of the greatest lines I ever heard in an interview was early 9 Inch Nails when the interviewer asks, what's his name?
Trent Reznor.
Yeah, Trent Reznor. Why do you smash your instruments on stage? Because their stage show is just an absolute insane asylum. And he looks at the guy and says, if the instrument doesn't work, the instrument must pay.
but he has that
answer.
He has that aggressive presence on stage. So true story. My wife, Deborah, and I went to the first Lollapalooza, which was very prevalent in the early 90s. We went to the very first Lollapalooza tour that came to Mansfield, Massachusetts, which included the Butthole Surfers, Susie and the Banshees, although they pulled out at the last minute, Living Colour, Ice-T, Body Count, 9 Inch Nails, and Jane's Addiction. And when Trent Reznor and 9 Inch Nails, we had great seats. I think we were in the second row. 9 Inch Nails, Trent Reznor was walking around. He had one of those gallon jugs of water and whipped it into the audience and literally hit the guy next to Deb, knocked him over. And that guy picked that up and threw it right back at him. It was friggin' hilarious.
So then you have, are you a Chris Isaak fan?
Yeah, I like some of his stuff.
Did you ever see him?
Yeah, fantastic.
Yeah, that's one of my bucket list. I'd love to see Chris Isaak at concert.
You are going to be blown away at what a showman he is.
Yeah, he's funny. He's a funny bastard too.
Funny
Very
guy, plays stuff. He's got a great range vocally. When we saw him at the Hampton Beach Casino, he actually came out into the audience. I mean, way out into the audience. People were going nuts. He was dead entertaining.
Yeah.
Really loved him. I mean, come on, Wicked Game. That was heavily in rotation.
Oh, I love that song. That's a great song, man.
One of the sexiest videos of all time.
Yeah, and she hated him. She hated.
Oh, wait a minute. There was a girl in that video. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry you were looking at Chris Isaac. Okay.
I wasn't looking at Chris.
Blur
That
came
girl-
out with The Great Escape in '95, and Radiohead comes out with The Bends in 1995.
That's when you knew that band was for real.
Yeah, absolutely. Bands that were started in 1991: Bone Thugs and Harmony, Cake. I hate that group.
By the way,
We're
Cake.
going the distance. Okay.
By the way, the band Cake.
Horrible.
I fucking hate that band.
Horrible. I was working a concert. I work concert security in New Mexico. I think they were backing up like No Doubt or something, one of these bands. And they were horrible. I was always right at the stage in the pit. And it was torture listening to this. The band was good, but the guy, their whole presentation. And evidently that lasted like 3 shows. And they axed them from the... Because they had one song that everyone wanted to hear, and the rest of it was just this guy talking. Like, they weren't entertaining whatsoever.
Even that song is terrible.
Yeah. So groups formed in 1991, Counting Crows, Dave Matthews Band, who you're going to see tomorrow night, right?
Yes, I am.
House of Pain, owners of the greatest one-hit wonder of all time, right? Incubus, very interesting group, Incubus is, very interesting group. They're not they were mainstream, then they weren't, and they kind of have this following, like Dave Matthews has, like the Grateful Dead has. They just established a following, and they can live off that touring. That's really all they do. Oasis, Portishead, very interesting group.
Very interesting group.
Rage Against the Machine, Rancid, the 3-6 Mafia.
I love Rancid.
Yeah, and TLC.
Do you know the whole Rancid Green Day connection?
I don't want to know it.
So the lead singer of Rancid is Tim Armstrong.
Yeah.
His brother is the lead singer of
Green Day.
Billy Joe Armstrong. By the way, in terms
I
of
like Rancid better than Green Day.
They're both great bands, but Green Day is a much better band, much better live. Seen them both. They're both fantastic. In terms of House of Pain, greatest one-hit wonder. But you got to give credit for Everlast, who went out and did his own thing with
Whitey Ford.
Whitey Ford sings the blues and
Yep.
what it's like. Yeah.
Yep.
Great song. I love that.
Yeah, he broke off and he did his own thing. Again, a guy that made enough money off of that one song. Actually, House of Pain's first 2 albums were really good. They were really good albums. It's just they ran into a oversaturation issue, which is the death of a lot of those bands.
You know who you neglected to mention?
Who's that?
First album back in 1990, The Black Crowes.
Wait a minute. What? Greatest one-hit wonder of all time. Greatest one-hit wonder of all time. No doubt. I don't even have to continue because right now everyone's going like this. Everyone's jumping. I just saw a video from Lollapalooza. It was Limp Bizkit's set, and I'm still a Limp Bizkit fan. And we'll get to them in the next episode from 96 to 2000. But I'm still a big fan of this. And, DJ Lethal, when House of Pain broke up, he went and played with Limp Bizkit. So how's that for a transition? You go from one huge band to another huge band. Like that's
an even bigger band.
Yeah, continuous success right on to that.
Who's the most interesting member of Limp Bizkit? Westmoreland.
Westmoreland is a strange dude.
He's a strange
know what he collects?
Good guitar player.
He's a collector of skulls.
Shocking.
He's a very good guitar player.
He is a very good guitar.
Very unique in his style. You never see his face. You never see him without anything, without some sort of makeup on or whatever. But Yeah, let's get some hits from the '90s. Let's see from the early '90s. Seal had his debut. I think was '91. He had moderate success.
He had huge success in the 90s.
Well, he had in the '90s. He had the theme song from Batman Returns, I think, right? Another guy that had a face made for radio, but sorry, I don't care. He had some burn issues or something. Then this, you had this. This was early '90s stuff, right? This is when I liked the Red Hot Chili Peppers, when they sing just like this, when it's just no kids walking down the street, looking at my feet, gonna eat some meat. This guy's debut. Still my favorite Lenny Kravitz song. I think he debuted in '91. Right? I think this was his first chart. His first single that charted. All right, little Lenny Kravitz, can't go wrong. And you can't deny Lenny. You can't.
No, Lenny's cool.
You can't deny him. The dude,
I saw
American Woman, he gets a little, but you can't deny him. You just
Let Love Rule, man.
That's it.
Believe, great song.
Yep. Then you have My Girl. This was the jam now. This is the jam. Right?
My love is blind, can't you see my desire?
I don't care who you are. You can't say this is a bad song. Miss Jackson. This is all early '90s. This is the early '90s, buddy. I don't know how long this.
What about when did The Miseducation of Lauryn Hill come out?
That came out after the Fugees broke up. So that was late '90s. Then there's this classic.
And we haven't even talked about the Beastie Boys.
Well, they were an '80s band. They had their '90s. They had
they peaked in the '90s.
Yeah, they had some good albums in the '90s. Rest in peace, Dolores O'Riordan.
I know.
Right? That was a sad story, man.
Very.
Like, it's just so random. Like, Dolores O'Riordan died? Like, what? That was one of those shockers to me.
Yeah, it was.
It's so unnecessary. I hope this is bringing back some memories for some people out there listening to a little 90s review.
You know what this brings me back to?
What's that?
My daughter, who was born in 1993, loved this song.
Oh, who doesn't? Right? Good taste. You know, I'm gonna play one of the greatest guitar solos on radio that ever came on the radio. All right? This. Matthew Sweet, Girlfriend. This is a fucking jam. It's his only real hit. But this dude could wail on the guitar. And this song was kind of an under the radar.
It was so good. I want somebody.
So if you want to go out and download this, Matthew Sweet, Girlfriend, because I know you've heard it out there. And that goes on to be just a smoking guitar solo. So, wrapping it up,
Well, two things that we haven't really talked about in terms of 1990 to 1994, and I don't want to
There's a
prolong
lot
the
before
episode
95.
anymore. But we haven't talked about one of the big things that occurred in the early 1990s, actually in 1990, was the death of Stevie Ray Vaughan.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know how much there is to really talk about. He's an 80s guy, but he's one of those guys. What can we say that hasn't already been said and is still being said about him, right?
Yeah, it was a terrible
It was
tragedy.
horrible.
And one of the things that was really lousy about music starting out in the 90s, and I remember listening to it on the radio as one of those things where you know exactly where you were when that happened. And initially, they were announcing that it was Eric Clapton that died.
And I was bummed out when it wasn't.
That's
I'm serious. I like Stevie Ray Vaughan better than Eric Clapton, so of course I'm going to go that route, right? I can tell you, I was supposed to have a date with a girl that night. I was stationed in Sacramento, Mayfair Air Force Base. I was supposed to go on a date with this girl, and I hear it's a Saturday. It happened on a Saturday, and I hear Stevie Ray Vaughan dead at the age of whatever he was, 29.
He was young.
Yeah, and I cancel the date and just go into this total binge drinking and Stevie Ray Vaughan CDs all night. Nobody was going to get in the way of that. That was a death that bothered me. I wasn't like crying over it, but yeah, Stevie Ray. So,
the interesting thing, and I'm looking at it right now. It was actually the anniversary of it was, so that was 1990, 2000, 2010, 2020, 31 years ago on Friday. This coming Friday.
I thought it was the summertime. Yeah. Yeah. Because Sacramento's like a pizza oven in the summertime. That I remember.
And by the way, it was a Monday.
Was it a Monday?
I was in work.
I don't know. Why are they having a festival on a Monday? He was leaving the festival.
When Deb and I went and saw Lollapalooza, I think it was a Tuesday. They don't hold everything on the weekends. They're not doing things for your fucking convenience.
I might have to disagree.
I'm looking at it right now.
Give me my choices
computer.
before we end the show. I'm not going to listen to your facts. Give me my choice.
So we're going to build your own super group, right?
Yeah. Now it's your turn.
It's my turn to turn it on and pick
give
out
me
who...
the choices like I did to you, and my band was better than yours. So
your band was not.
Now it's your turn
to
put your twist on it. Bring it.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay. So build. Oh God.
Go ahead.
Your supergroup,
right,
starts with the lead singer.
Correct.
And the strange thing is that you've already mentioned them.
Okay.
So is it lead singer of the band? Is it Ice Cube or Ice-T?
Ooh. I gotta go. Oof. You got me, buddy. You pinned me down on this one. I always said Ice-T is one of the best rappers of all time. His flow, his style, his lyrical genius, but Ice Cube is a beast. I got to go with the New Jack Hustler, Ice-T. I got to go with him.
All right, that's where we'll start. We'll
wow,
continue
this
on.
is an interesting. This is an interesting.
We'll continue on.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I think we touched on enough. This was a memory jogger more than, one of our usual fact-based or info-based shows. I think we covered enough. We can always pick up a little bit. And we did this tonight on a Monday because Jack's schedule for the
It's
people that are
Tuesday.
watching the live stream.
It's Tuesday. Who thought that Stevie Ray Vaughan died on a Saturday?
It's Tuesday. Whatever.
It's Tuesday.
I don't know. This is getting bad. Anyways, the podcast listeners don't care because it's going to get released on Thursday anyways.
I appreciate the accommodation. You know, things are a little bit crazy now. What can I tell you?
All right.
By the way, we didn't even talk about Woodstock 1994, which was a huge event in the 90s.
Again, when you talk about decades, there's a lot to cover. And I think breaking it down into halves is kind of the best way to cover a decade, because you could go all over the place if you're doing it all in one show.
Well, it's kind of cool in that you had that whole new kind of wave of music. Not that it was new wave, but a whole new wave of music. Because if you think about the people that had been around a long time, and I think you really did a nice job in terms of pointing out Voodoo Lounge, which was really a great album by the Stones.
Yes,
that showed their staying power.
Yeah,
but they were one of the few.
Exactly.
I mean, name a great Elton John album of the 1990s, right? Pink Floyd was gone. Even David Bowie was struggling to find a new sound to figure out what he was actually going to do. He did Tin Machine, which was a fucking horrible experiment.
Horrible.
And he put out a couple of albums that were really, really lackluster, right? There were a lot of bands that were, started in the 60s or 70s, kind of did the MTV thing in the 80s, and in the 90s, they kind of lost their way, including ZZ Top. You know, the whole eliminator thing and the synthesizer sound and whatnot had run its course.
Yeah, they couldn't match it. They couldn't keep that up. When did Bridges to Babylon come out?
I think that was 94.
Yeah, was it 94?
I'll check on my computer here.
Because Voodoo Lounge came out in 94. So I think Bridges of Babylon came out in maybe 96.
I'll tell you in a second. Oh, later, 1997.
97. Okay, yeah.
97. So. By the way, Bridges of Babylon, one of my favorite Stone songs of all time, is on Bridges of Babylon.
And that is?
Saint of Me.
Okay.
Do you know that too?
That was a good album. I mean, that wasn't a bad album. It wasn't a bad album. So that's amazing that they were pulling that off in the 90s in the midst of everything else that was going on, you know, with Britpop and hip-hop and grunge and, you know, every other. You had Christian rock. That was the beginning of the new country sound, you know, Garth Brooks and all those people that I never listened to, but...
well, and we also didn't talk about how MTV changed from, you know, look, it kind of started out as kind of punky, new wavy, you know, cutting edge bands that we would not have ever really learned about without a lot of that play.
Right.
Then got really popular in the mid 80s with Live Aid and Michael Jackson and Huey Lewis and the News and whatnot. And then in the 90s,
they were still relevant in the early 90s, MTV.
They were still relevant in the early 90s, but you had that change where they started turning into Christina Aguilera and Britney Spears and the pop thing and TLC and all of that stuff.
Because they have to cater to the newer generations, like kind of what we're seeing now. You know? And that's when we were moving on at that point anyways. You know?
Yes.
But
I think MTV's never really recovered.
No, then they of course, they stopped totally, but that was technology driven, you know, cell phones and MP3s and easy downloads, right?
Napster.
So, yeah. So next episode we'll cover 96 to 2000. I hope we, you know, did a satisfactory job for the people that are listening. I hope we covered some stuff that, like I said, either jogged some memories or, you know, or they didn't know about. So I'm going to, let's end it on this one. Today was a good day, buddy. Every day's a good day because I'm retired.
Look at these bags.
All right, everybody. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. If you like the show, share it. Subscribe to it. Thanks for tuning in. We appreciate you listening. We appreciate your support. And we will be back next episode next week. Anything to say, Jack?
I was looking for Scott's outro.
Yeah, Scott the IT guy must have bailed on us. He always says, "Oh, you don't talk about hip hop. You don't talk about..." And when we do, where does he go? Yeah, nowhere to be found.
That goddamn son of a bitch.
All right, guys. Have a good night.